It started as a joke. "Midnight hide and seek," said Carson, waving a torn flyer like it was a golden ticket. "Real forest, real stakes. They call it the game. Local legend stuff. You in?" I was a junior at Pinehurst University, a small liberal arts college surrounded by miles of nothing but pine woods and winding roads. Most students left on weekends. I didn't have a car or many friends, so I usually stayed behind. But that weekend, I said yes. I didn't even ask what the rules were. That's how desperate I was to feel like I belonged. We met at the forest's edge at 11:52 p.m. sharp. The air smelled like wet bark and cold iron. 5 of us total. Me, Carson, his girlfriend Dana, a quiet freshman named Felix, and a grad student named Brooke who wore a beanie and looked like she hadn't slept in days. There was also someone else, a man in a hooded jacket, face shadowed. He didn't speak, just handed Carson a small wooden box. "What's that?" I whispered. "The starter," Carson grinned. "You'll see." Carson opened the box. Inside was a rusty bell, an old Polaroid camera, and a folded slip of paper. He took the paper out and read aloud. "At midnight the game begins. One seeker. For hiders. If the bell rings, do not answer. If your photo is taken, you are no longer playing. No phones. No flashlights. Hide well. If you're the last to be found, you win. And you may ask one question." We all laughed nervously. Brooke didn't. She was staring at the trees like something was already watching. We left our phones in the wooden box. Brooke insisted on turning hers off entirely. "No signals," she muttered. "They don't like signals." I thought it was part of the act. The hooded man handed Carson the bell, then turned and vanished into the forest without a word. 11:59 p.m. Carson grinned. "All right, I'm seeker. You guys have 60 seconds to hide. Go." The moment we stepped past the first line of trees, everything changed. The forest swallowed sound. I couldn't hear Dana giggling anymore, or Felix's shoes crunching dead leaves. Even Carson's voice faded like mist in the wind. I ran. I don't know why I ran so far, but something about the quiet, too quiet, triggered an old animal instinct. I darted past mossy trunks and twisting branches until my breath came ragged and hot. I found a hollow under an ancient oak and crawled inside. And waited. The bell rang. Soft at first, then again louder. A sharp metallic clang that didn't echo. I froze. I remembered the warning. If the bell rings, do not answer. I hadn't even heard footsteps. Then I heard something else. A whisper, not a voice, not in words. Just a pressure in my ears. Like someone breathing right next to my head, but invisible. I clenched my jaw and stayed still. Minutes passed. Then, from deeper in the woods, I heard Dana scream. It wasn't a scared scream. It was a hurt scream, cut off mid-breath. I wanted to run toward her, but my limbs wouldn't move. My hands were shaking. I reached into my jacket pocket instinctively, where my phone should have been. Gone. Only then did I realize how dark it had become. There was no moon. No stars. The canopy above felt like a lid shutting us in. Something snapped to my left. A Polaroid flash. My hiding place lit up for a split second. A figure stood inches from the opening. I couldn't make out the face. Click. Another photo. And then, footsteps, retreating. I stayed frozen for what felt like hours. Then I heard whispering again, closer this time. Except this time, it wasn't in my ears. It was coming from inside the tree. From behind me. I turned slowly. The hollow wasn't just a hole. It went deeper than I'd thought. Way deeper. A narrow tunnel twisted downward into the roots. The whisper came again. Louder. Like words, but not English. Or maybe too many voices talking at once. I should have crawled out. Instead, I crawled deeper. The tunnel led to a chamber of roots, lit by a faint orange glow. There were carvings on the walls, scratches, hundreds of names etched in panicked spirals. In the center of the chamber was a photograph. Dana, taken moments ago. She looked terrified, her face blurred, her hands covering her ears. I turned the photo over. On the back, in crooked handwriting. 3 found. 2 remain. I was one of them. But who else was still left? And who, or what, was taking the photos? The silence after I found Dana's photo wasn't normal. It wasn't peaceful or quiet like a forest should be. It was wrong. It was the kind of silence that makes you doubt you're still in the real world, like all sound had been vacuumed away and the world left to rot in its stillness. I clutched the photo and slowly backed out of the root chamber. The tunnel behind me looked longer now, narrower, like it didn't want to let me go. Something scraped along the dirt behind me. I didn't look back. I crawled until the whispering stopped and the cold air hit my face again. I emerged into the forest just as the bell rang for the second time. Clang, clang, then a third time slower. Clang. I bolted. I didn't care which direction. I just ran, blindly, through trees that all looked the same. My legs burned. Branches slashed across my face. I didn't know where I was going until... Thunk. I ran straight into Felix. We both yelped, then stared at each other in mutual terror. "You too?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Dana's gone," I told him. He nodded slowly. "I saw her. Or, I saw someone wearing her face." I felt sick. He held up something, an old Polaroid camera. "I found this by a tree. There were photos all around it." He passed me a few. One showed Carson with pitch-black eyes. Another showed Dana, except her mouth was open too wide, stretching down to her collarbone. Another was blurry, but I swear it was Brooke, standing in a tunnel of mirrors, with dozens of reflections behind her. None of them matched. "We have to find the others," I said. "And get out." Felix shook his head. "We're not allowed to leave." "What?" He pointed to a tree trunk where something had been carved, deep and raw. "The game ends when they let it. Not you let it. They." He pulled out one more photo. I hadn't noticed it before. This one was blank. "I think this one's meant for me," he whispered. We agreed to stick together. I don't know why that felt like a mistake. Maybe because, the moment we said it, we heard the bell again. And it was closer. We crouched low behind a fallen log. Then flash. A camera went off, maybe 20 feet away. We heard footsteps. Light ones. A figure moved between the trees. It stopped just ahead. It wasn't Carson. It wasn't Brooke. It wasn't anyone I recognized. It wore a burlap sack over its head and held the Polaroid like a weapon. Its limbs were too long. Its fingers curled around the camera like roots around stone. Felix whispered, "What happens if it takes your picture?" Before I could stop him, he stood. "HY," he shouted. The creature turned. Flash. Felix vanished. Not in a puff of smoke. Not with sound. He was simply gone. No scream. No thud. One moment he was next to me, and the next, nothing. In his place was a photo. It drifted down, soft as ash. I crawled forward and picked it up. Felix stood in the middle of a clearing, holding a blank photo. Except in this photo, his eyes were closed, and something was growing out of his back. A shape. A second spine. Or maybe a tail. On the back of the photo, I read, "For found. One remains. Me." I ran again. I didn't stop until the air thinned and I collapsed at the base of a ridge. My palms were scraped and bloody. I didn't even feel the pain. I looked up and saw a light. A lantern. It was swinging gently from a branch. Underneath it stood Brooke. She didn't look surprised to see me. "I told Carson not to bring new people," she said. "What?" "They always do this. Every year. Someone hears about the game. Thinks it's funny. Thinks it's fake." I stumbled forward. "You knew." She nodded. "My brother played in 2019. He made it to the end. He asked his question. He's still out here." They gave him an answer, but not the one he wanted. I felt a wave of nausea hit me. What was his question? Brooke looked me straight in the eyes. He asked how to win. They told him he already had. Then they laughed. And laughed. And laughed. The trees rustled behind us. The wind died instantly. Brooke's face darkened. "You have to finish it now. You're the last one." "How?" "You have to let it find you." But first, she reached into her coat and handed me something cold and metallic. "The bell. Use it when it's near. But only once. If it rings more than once, you'll never leave. Not even your bones." Before I could ask anything else, she vanished into the trees like a ghost. The forest had changed again. Now it was full of whispers. Not in the air, but in my head. Each tree I passed seemed to echo my thoughts, twisted and wrong. "You shouldn't have come. You were always going to stay. You look like him." I walked for what felt like hours until I came to a clearing I didn't recognize, and yet somehow knew. There were Polaroids scattered like leaves across the ground. A circle of them, with a tree stump in the middle. On the stump, a blank photo. Waiting. I stepped inside the circle. The air went still. Something moved in the dark beyond the clearing. And I rang the bell. The sound of the bell echoed like thunder through the clearing. Except it wasn't loud. It was deep. Like it struck the bottom of something hollow beneath the earth. As soon as the last chime faded, the forest changed. Again, the wind stopped moving. No leaves. No insects. No sound. Even the air seemed to thicken. Then, movement. Between the trees, just at the edge of vision, something shifted. I couldn't say it walked. It glided. Like mist, except it had weight. Its shape bent the air around it. Like heat above asphalt. It stopped just outside the circle of Polaroids. I couldn't see its face, if it even had one, but I felt it watching me. Not me exactly. It watched my memories. I didn't move. I remembered Brooke's words. Only once. Only ring it once. The entity stepped forward, one slow motion at a time. It hovered over the tree stump. And then, it took the blank photo. There was no flash. No camera. But the image appeared anyway. It developed right in front of me. My face. My real face. Except I was smiling. And there was something behind me. Too dark to see. I turned instinctively. Nothing. When I looked back, the photo was gone. In its place was a second bell. And a note. You are the seeker now. The game is not over. It never ends. But you may ask your question. I didn't understand. I didn't want to understand. I sat down on the stump, head spinning. What happens if I don't ask? I said aloud. No response. Only stillness. But something inside me knew, if I didn't ask, I'd stay here. Trapped in these woods. Forgotten. Just like the others. And so I asked. How do I win? The forest pulsed. The tree shimmered like water. The clearing bent in on itself, and suddenly I wasn't in the clearing anymore. I was back at campus. Or something like it. The buildings were there. The lamp posts. The clock tower blinking 12 a.m. over and over again. But everything was wrong. No people. No lights in the dorms. The air smelled like ash. I walked toward the quad. It was silent. Until I saw them. Carson. Dana. Felix. Brooke. All standing in the center of the field. All smiling. Too wide. Too still. I approached slowly. Dana moved first. She raised her arm, and I saw the Polaroid in her hand. It showed me. Sitting on the stump. Exactly as I'd just been. Welcome back, she whispered. Carson's mouth didn't move, but I heard his voice behind my ears. You won. You're free now. You just have to choose someone else. My stomach dropped. That's how the game continues. You don't leave the forest. You replace the seeker. You find new players. I turned to run, but I couldn't move. The world around me had frozen mid-frame. Like a photograph. Then I realized what I was standing in. A circle of Polaroids. Same as before. But these ones were different. Each one showed me. Different versions of me. One was screaming. One was crawling. One had no eyes. And one was smiling back at me. Exactly the way I was now. I snapped awake. Cold sweat. Bark against my back. I was in the forest again. The real one. The sun was rising. Had I dreamed all that? I scrambled up and ran. For real this time. Branches cut at my arms, the woods blurring by in streaks of green and gray. Eventually, I saw it. A paved road. A ranger's shack. Civilization. I collapsed on the shoulder, gasping. A truck passed. Then reversed. The driver leaned out. You okay, kid? I nodded, unable to speak. He gave me a ride back to campus. Everything looked normal. Students. Traffic. Laughter. Had it really happened? I told no one. How could I? Carson and Dana were away for the weekend. Felix had dropped out. Brooke wasn't enrolled at all. I checked every record. No one remembered them. Not even the administration. But I remembered. I still had the bell. It was in my backpack, heavy and cold. And the worst part? I started to hear it. Ringing. Just once. At exactly midnight. Every night. The first night, I ignored it. The second, I locked my windows and buried the bell in my closet. The third, the bell rang from under my pillow. I stopped sleeping. The fourth night, I woke up in the woods. No idea how I'd gotten there. There was a photo on my chest. Of my roommate. Asleep. Back at the dorm. With me standing in the doorway. That was last week. Since then, I found 4 more photos. All of strangers. People I don't know. Yet. But I will. Because I know now what the game wants. It doesn't feed on blood. It feeds on stories. On new players. And someone has to invite them. The game never ends. But it always begins with a question. And a bell. I tried everything. Burned the bell. Buried it in concrete. Drove 3 towns away and threw it into a river. It came back every time. On my desk. In my backpack. Once, tucked neatly between the pages of my chemistry textbook like a pressed flower. I never heard it arrive. I never saw it move. It was always just there. Worse, so were the photos. I found one taped to the inside of my bathroom mirror. A man I'd never seen before, brushing his teeth. Behind him, me, staring from the shower. The next morning, he was on the news. Missing. I stopped going to class. Stopped talking to people. If the game needed players, I wasn't going to give them any. No invites. No midnight talks. No flyers. No Forest. But the bell still rang. Every night at midnight. Just once. And with every ring, I felt pulled. Like a thread tightening somewhere deep inside me. I started dreaming in Polaroids. Black and white images. Always of people I knew, just on the edge of memory. A kid I sat next to in 6th grade. The barista from the cafe I used to frequent. A girl I matched with on a dating app but never met. And behind every person in those photos, trees. Then came the phone calls. Always from blocked numbers. I never answered. Until I did. The voice on the other end wasn't human. It spoke in static. But through the static, I could make out 3 words. 1 week left. Then a click. No call history. No voicemail. Just dead air. I tried leaving. Packed everything I owned and bought a bus ticket to Chicago. Didn't tell anyone. Just got up and went. The driver was silent the whole ride. At mile 72, I looked out the window and saw a familiar tree. Gnarled. Split down the middle. Covered in carvings. We passed it again 12 minutes later. And again. On the 4th pass, I looked down and the bell was in my lap. Still cold. Still heavy. Still waiting. The driver turned and finally spoke. You can't leave until they do. I ran off the bus at the next stop. I was back in Pinehurst. Back at the forest's edge. And that's when I saw her. Brooke. Same beanie. Same dead-eyed look. She was waiting beside the tree line like she knew I'd come. You lasted longer than most, she said. I didn't reply. She stepped forward and handed me a small, faded notebook. Inside were dozens of names. Dates. Locations. Each entry ended the same way. One invite sent. Game in progress. Some were crossed out. Some weren't. One name made my blood freeze. Mine. With today's date. Brooke looked me dead in the eyes. There's a reason the game never ends. I clenched my fists. Because no one ever wins. She shook her head. Because no one ever stops playing. Then she pointed. There was someone standing in the forest. A boy. Maybe 18. Nervous. Holding a flyer. He saw me and smiled. Hey, he called. Are you the guy who knows about midnight hide and seek? My stomach dropped. I backed away. No. You've got the wrong. But the bell rang. Just once. And the kid stepped forward. He handed me the flyer. It was the same as Carson's had been. Torn corners. Ink smudged. Same rules. Only now, my name was listed as the seeker. I dropped the flyer like it burned. The kid picked it back up. So, where do we meet? I heard it's in the woods outside town. I wanted to scream. To run. To punch a tree until I passed out. Instead, I said, don't. But he was already walking. Already fading into the trees. And I followed. The game had begun again. Same ritual. Same box. Same rules. Except now, I was the one holding the bell. The kid and 2 others, a girl with a pink hoodie and a guy with wire-rimmed glasses, laughed like this was some college prank. They didn't see the truth. Didn't see the faces carved into the bark behind them. Didn't see the Polaroids nailed to trees, upside down. They wouldn't see those things until it was too late. That night, I rang the bell. Once. The others scattered into the woods. I didn't chase them. I just walked. I didn't want to win. I just wanted to watch. To understand. The forest welcomed me now. It bent around me, made paths that didn't exist before. I passed a ring of stones that pulsed with heat. A pile of moss that whispered in a language I almost remembered. And then I saw it. A photo nailed to a tree. Of the new kid. Not hiding. Not scared. Smiling. And in his hand, the bell. I felt the world twist. The Polaroid curled in the heat. My ears rang, not with sound, but with pressure. And suddenly, I was outside the game. Watching myself play it. My hands weren't my own. My voice wasn't mine. But I still moved. Still hunted. Still sought. Because that's what the game does. It doesn't recruit players. It becomes them. One by one. Until there's no one left but the game itself. I don't remember walking back. 1 minute, I was in the forest, watching a kid ring the bell. The next, I was on campus again. My room. My bed. My sheets soaked in sweat. The bell on my chest. Like a weight that never left. I stared at it until sunrise. Didn't sleep. Didn't blink. Didn't move. because now I knew what it meant. I hadn't joined a game. I'd been recruited into a system. For days, I avoided people. Then, I did the opposite. I talked to everyone. At the library, I asked about local legends. At the archives, I asked about disappearances near the Pinehurst Woods. And in the basement of the town's historical museum, I found something. An old photograph tucked between pages of a forgotten book titled Appalachian Ritual Games, A Folk History. The picture showed a group of 6 people, circa 1890. One of them stood apart, holding a bell. Eyes black, smile hollow. Beneath the photo, someone had handwritten, "The First Seeker." He asked how to cheat death. This was his answer. It was never about winning. It was never about a question. It was about becoming the next anchor in a chain that never broke. I kept reading. The book explained the basics. The ritual, the seeker, the invitation, the reward, the punishment. But what caught my eye was one phrase. There is only one way to end the game. All must refuse to play. That's when I made a plan. I would track down the next players, and I would stop them from playing. I returned to the forest every night, sat by the tree stump, waited for them. The invitations always went out, whether I wanted them to or not. But maybe, just maybe, I could intercept them. On the 3rd night, I saw her. One of the 3 from the last round. The girl in the pink hoodie. She was alone now, eyes wide, clutching the rules sheet like a lifeline. I stepped out from behind the trees. She screamed. "Don't play," I said. "Please. It's not a game. It's—" She pointed the Polaroid camera at me. Flash. Pain lanced through my head like lightning. When I woke up, I was on the forest floor. She was gone. And next to me, a photo of me, lying exactly where I was now. That was the game's answer. You don't stop players. You don't warn them. You don't talk to them. Because once your name is written as seeker, you're nothing more than a vessel. You ring the bell. They hide. You find. Repeat. I nearly broke. I stopped leaving my room. Stopped eating. But the bell still rang. Still pulled. And one night, I decided to ring it twice. I wanted to see what would happen. I walked to the stump. Midnight. Held the bell. And rang. Once. Silence. Then again. The forest screamed. The air tore open like paper. Wind shrieked through dead branches. And then, they came. Not players. Not seekers. Them. Shapes that didn't walk, didn't float. They twisted. Around physics. Around light. Around understanding. They didn't speak. They observed. I felt my memories bleed from my nose. Images of my mother. A birthday party. The first time I rode a bike. All drained into the soil. And then, they reached inside me. I don't know how long I was out. But when I woke, I was in a place I'd never seen. Not forest. Not campus. A room made entirely of photographs. Floating in midair. Shifting like jellyfish. Each photo had a name. Each name was crossed out. Except one. Mine. Still glowing. Still active. And behind it, a mirror. But no reflection. Just a door. I stepped through. And came out. Somewhere else. The trees were wrong. Black and silver. Sky blood red. Time didn't exist here. Light bent sideways. This was the source. Where the game had been born. And there, in the middle of a circle of ash, stood a man. The same one from the photo in the book. The first seeker. He looked up. And spoke. "You're the last one," he said. "No," I whispered. "I refuse. I won't play anymore." "You already are," he said. "The moment you joined, you became part of the loop. There has to be a way to end it." "There is." I stared. He stepped aside. Behind him was a child. 7, maybe 8 years old. Scared. Trembling. A bell in her hands. "She's the next player," he said. "You can let her play. Or—" He drew a blade from the air. Cut the thread. I froze. She looked up at me. Tears in her eyes. This wasn't metaphorical. If I took that blade, if I ended her, the game would die with her. No more seekers. No more Polaroids. But the price would be everything I am. No afterlife. No memory. No name. No story. Just erased. I took the blade. My hands shook. I stepped toward her. She didn't run. Didn't cry. She simply asked, "Will it hurt?" I dropped the blade. And the world collapsed. When I woke up, I was lying on the grass beside the campus library. Morning. Sunlight. Birds. The bell gone. No Polaroids. No forest. Just silence. Peaceful. Real. That was 6 days ago. I haven't seen it since. I think I won. Not by asking a question. Not by surviving. But by refusing. I broke the loop. And now? Now I wait. Because if it ever starts again, I will be the first one to stop it.